Welcome to the Self-Publishing Tips and Tricks Show, a series designed to give you insight into the world of self-publishing and marketing your books. Featuring your hosts, Shannon, the author behind the pen name S.C. Huston, Ben Pick, and Morgan Lee. Join us several times each month when we interview authors about their self-publishing and marketing journeys, talk to industry leaders, and discuss books about writing, self-publishing, and marketing.
Hi everyone, I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining us in Self-Publishing Tips and Tricks. Today, we'll be discussing protected business structures like LLCs with Emma Rosen, nonfiction and children's book author, as well as YouTuber. Before we talk to her, let's give some updates on what's going on in our lives and our writing journeys. So we're recording this towards the end of July, and this episode will air on August 1st, just to give you a little timeline. So it's not much of a gap between the two. So Shannon, how are you doing today?
Well, I just got back from a cruise and I'm sick. My hubby's sick. So the only one's not sick is my kiddo. But we're trying to get this interview done. And unfortunately, Morgan was not able to join us for this next recording. We did have this recorded once before, but I don't know what happened. Somehow I deleted or it lost or something. I couldn't get the interview back. I tried as much as I could to recover it. So we're doing this again. And Emma is so awesome to join us again and do this again with us. This is coming out relatively quick. And I don't even know what I'm doing business-wise because I'm still in vacation mode here. And I do have a Kickstarter up for my next book. And I think that's going to launch in September. So I'm excited about that. And I know that Morgan has her book up as a pre-order, her last book in her trilogy. So we'll get that link into the show notes as well. That is scheduled for August 5th, I believe, for her next book, which is Seed Among Good Ground. So what about you? How's your writing going, your books?
It is very, very slow at the moment. So my life is kind of getting in the way and my writing has come to almost a halt. I've been working on about a chapter a month, which is extremely slow, but I'm still getting forward progress, which is always good. And outside of that, you can always find me 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time as Writing to Write on YouTube, where I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I am happy that you're at least getting some writing done,
Yes.
even if it's really slow.
Yeah. Forward progress is still progress. Yeah, so that's all we got. But let's bring on Emma Rosen, who is an independent author who writes nonfiction and beautiful children's picture books. She's fascinated by marine ecology and early parenting and loves supporting creative small businesses. She is currently working on Discovering Marine and Coastal Habitats, a series sponsored by Natural England. Emma has a successful YouTube channel where she shares publishing tips and her experiences as an author. She's the director of her publishing company, Sartain Publishing Limited, established in 2018.
Hi. Thank you for
Welcome,
the introduction.
Emma.
That's lovely. Hi.
Of course.
I'm sorry you're not well, Shannon.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it's, when you leave your house and you go other places, you get exposed to a lot of stuff out there, and yeah, it is what it is.
Well, I'm in holiday mode as well. My children are now all broken up for school. This is the first day when they've all been off. So I've given them devices. I've told them to stay out the way. But yeah, it's that now difficult work-life balance to,
Yes.
Do lots of nice quality time things with them and keep them entertained and also still run my business. So good fun.
Well, would you like to tell us anything about yourself that we may have missed on our side?
As you guys said, I'm an indie author. I have a number of books. My first book was about breastfeeding. I'll hold it up for those of you watching this on video. What happened was, when I'd always wanted to be a writer, I was one of these people that when I was little, if they said, what do you want to be when you grow up? It would always be a writer. But I didn't really know how you went about doing that. And it certainly wasn't something anybody I knew had ever achieved. You couldn't get a job that would lead to you being able to be an author. So I didn't know how to achieve my dream, really. And then when I had my first child, I found that I faced a lot of sort of social pressure and misconceptions, particularly around feeding him, but also other aspects of having a new baby or being pregnant. And this book, Milk, started off as an exercise of writing down the things that I found frustrating, as well as funny memories and bits and pieces. And after years and years and years of writing this, and I think it took me about 6 years in all to write, because I was living it as well. And then I suddenly realized I had something like 80,000 words, and that if I'd put all that work in, I wanted to make it into something coherent. I looked into traditional publishing. I queried a number of agents. I was signed with an agent for a short time. I obviously approached publishers via the agent, but also directly myself, and did kind of seek that avenue. But essentially what I'm writing about is something that's quite niche, although arguably it isn't. Lots and lots of people experience early parenthood, but in terms of the market for people buying books within that sphere, I guess. So I got lots of lovely complimentary letters saying this is a lovely book, but it's not going to be commercially viable for us, which I understand for a large publisher. And I ultimately decided that actually the best thing to do would be to publish it myself. By that point, I'd discovered authortube and had seen all of these amazing people sharing their journeys and realized it was something I was able to do that was within anybody's abilities, really. And I terminated my contract with my agent and I decided, actually, let's do this myself, because actually this is my personal story. This is a subject I know lots about and I'm passionate about. So I can market this book and I can make this the kind of book that people like me would want to read. So, and as soon as I had all that control back in my court to make all the decisions around editing, cover design, all of the things, it was suddenly exciting again. So yes, that was my first book that got me into it. And then when you've written one book, you think, well, I'll write another one. So I wrote a children's book. Lily the Limpet Gets Lost was my second book. And for me, this was then going back to my qualifications, I guess. I have a degree in marine biology and I was a science teacher. So I decided to write a story that would help to teach children a little bit about some of the things I was interested in marine biology. Since then, I've continued to write things about the sea. As you said, I've been recently working on a series called The Discovering Marine and Coastal Habitat, sponsored by Natural England. So again, that's using my marine biology background. And I also wrote a book about self-publishing for fellow authors. So I like to write things with an element of information and education without it being schooly, I guess, especially since I do also work as a school teacher as well. So I'm very aware of not turning every book into a now gather round children, I'm going to tell you something fascinating. So yeah, that's kind of the books that I write. And I also, as you say, have a YouTube channel where I share lots of tips and tricks and the odd vlog, and I do writing sprints, chaotic writing sprints every Monday morning. This is why the fact that you guys lost the recording, if you've joined my writing sprints, you'll know that sometimes my laptop just runs out of charge and everyone just has to wait while I set up again, or my dog suddenly goes crazy or something. So yeah, it happens to all of us.
And so all of what you said there reminds me of some of the questions I asked you that were not part of our lineup, which is, and I'd like to go ahead and ask again so that our audience knows which one your marine biology books for kids. I think I remember asking you the age group because I was thinking about my kid likes to read nonfiction, but I believe it's under his age group, if I remember right. But could you let our audience know what age group those are for?
Yeah, so my children's books, I usually say are age 4 to 7. I do think there's always variation with children's books. I feel a certain amount of pressure when asked to choose an age, because I would have read picture books like these to my children when they were littler, because they, certainly the rhyming ones as well, they like to listen to it. And my children aren't the kinds of kids that will rip up a book. They're the kinds that will sit and listen. But obviously all children are different. And for some 2-3-year-olds, there's just no way they're going to sit still. And yeah, a paperback like the one I'm holding up right now would never survive. And equally at the top end of the age range, there are children who older than 7 still really like to read a picture book. So I think it's knowing your own kid and what they like to read. But I always think they're in a similar age range to Julia Donaldson's books. So The Gruffalo and The Singing Mermaid and The Snail and the Whale, they're that kind of length and feel. So if your kids like those, I think it'll be age appropriate.
Okay, awesome. And then I think I remember also asking you what time your sprints go, because you say Monday, but you are in the UK. So for US audience, it's much earlier in the morning, I believe.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it, to find a time that works for everybody. So it's my Monday morning at 9:30. Essentially, it's when I've got home from the school run, made a coffee, got my dog to sit down, and that's when we do the writing sprints. And yeah, we've had to find a time that works across both the time zones. And funnily enough, when we recorded this before, I forgot that the sun goes down and I ended up sitting in the dark by the end of it. Went downstairs to my husband and just went, why did these things happen to me? But yeah, so I'm grateful that for those watching on video, I am lit by sunlight today.
Yeah. And if I didn't say it on YouTube, so let me add another part of this. Some of our audience been with us from the beginning. Some are new. We've actually got quite a few new audience members on Spotify just in the last 6 months. AuthorTube is a subsection of YouTube that is made up of writers and publishers. So you don't have to be published. You could just be a writer. And we do writing sprints, like Emma was saying. And so, Emma, if I do not remember, because I did not remember before, please reach out to me, because I have access to a document that's like on my writing sprints, but almost everybody everybody who's in the authortube community who knows of it, they include this link in their description box, but it is a spreadsheet of all the authortubers who are sprinting, so that anyone can go on there and find someone sprinting at any time of the day. And the time period that you are sprinting, my audience, because I do early in the morning my time at 8 a.m. Central, a lot of them are from like Germany. Like I have one from Germany, I have a few over in the UK who are like, there's no other writing sprints this early, but you're early on Monday. So, you know, if they could see your sprint there, they may join you, from those who are on that side of the world, who are looking for those early sprints. So just remind me if I don't remember, I'll get you added, because I do have access to the document. I'm one of the people who can modify it. I don't keep track. Like there's someone else who does the document, but I have access to add people to it. So remind me, I'll get you added on there if the people can find you.
Thank you. That sounds really, really helpful. And I've only been doing writing sprints since January. And I found for me, especially because I just do the Monday morning, also because I never work in a school on a Monday, so I know I'll be there. And it means that I've started my week with sitting down and doing something creative, and that sets my week up. But by me doing the writing sprint, by me hosting it, I've got to be there and I'm on camera with people watching me doing some work. So I need to get on with it. And I like to think, although it is there for the authortube community, if there are people doing other stuff for other businesses and they just want some company, you know, they're doing their emails or even just doing stuff around the house, you know, you don't have to be writing to come hang out. But I think authortube, it's definitely been a really huge thing for me, because I found a community. There are writers that I am friends with that I found through watching their videos, and sometimes that means we offer each other opportunities, sometimes that means that we help each other out. I know to reach out to a certain person because they know about this certain thing. It also feels really good when I can share some information that I've learned and that's helpful to somebody else who's in the position that I was however long ago. And I like to think that, especially because I do work as a teacher, I'm quite good at doing lots and lots of research, pulling all those things together and then go, okay, here in a more understandable form, here's all this stuff. Because there are so many options. And I think just being able to have that information there, have that support there, to see other people doing it and, you know, doing this in lots of different ways, it's highly likely that lots of us don't actually know people. In a way, it's similar to motherhood. Suddenly you have this book baby and you don't have any book mum friends. So authortube kind of gives you that community of people who get it and have the information and have been there and can support you. So I mean, I've been doing authortube probably for 6-7 years, and it's brilliant. I've never been involved in any of the drama that occurs. It always passes me by. So it's a nice little corner of the internet that I hang out in.
Yeah, I don't like any of the drama. As far as I know, there's not any drama going on, but I've heard of drama in the past.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we also connect on that because I used to teach, and I gravitated toward YouTube because I did not do social media before. My accounts didn't exist before I started publishing, but I gravitated YouTube because it felt like a platform where I could share the knowledge that I had. So same, I feel the same as you do about that. But yeah, and I also I set up my sprints as either accountability or productivity sprints, and I always say, because I have like a little intro that I always say, I have it written down, I just read it, but I say, you know, hold yourself accountable, or if you're here to be productive for whatever it is, whether reading, writing, housework, schoolwork, day job, whatever it is, you know, it's a good place to hang out and be with people. So definitely I feel you on all of that. So well, let's go ahead and get into our question for you, which the first one is, can you tell us when you first decided to create an LLC and why you made this decision?
My business has been treated as an LLC, and I mean, in this country we call it a limited company. When I was deciding to publish my first book, I was aware that made me a business owner. However I looked at it, I was selling a product and people hopefully would be paying for this product, and so therefore I needed some kind of structure to that. And for most of us, the options are either to be a sole trader, so in that instance you don't have to have the same kind of levels of registration and public information, but the liabilities are on you as a person. Whereas a limited liability company, so an LLC or an LTD as it is in the UK, the company is liable. So to me, that was one of the reasons that I went for it. When I was considering publishing my book, spoke to my husband, who was a director in a company, sort of asked his opinions. He was more knowledgeable about how different things worked. And we both agreed that this limited company structure structure would probably be the best decision. And there were a couple of reasons for that. The main one was about limiting liability. I certainly don't try to ever say anything inflammatory or, cause any problems. But if I did and somebody wanted to sue me for something, again, that's not going to mean that I lose my home or that it's going to affect my family. It affects my business. And to me, that was an important division. Equally, it gave me a certain amount of protection over the name of my company. So when you register a limited company in the UK, you have to have an original name that nobody else is using. So no one else can now set up a limited company in the UK called Sartain Publishing. It's only me. So I was like, that gives me that name as mine. And yes, I can add extra protection by filing a copyright on that, but it just automatically gave me a certain level of, this is mine and no one else can also use this. This is part of my intellectual property. And then there were tax reasons as well. These days, the tax laws have changed in this country. It used to be that if you were paying yourself as a director via dividend payouts, that was a better situation tax-wise to pay the corporation tax rather than your all the sort of earning taxes. Now it's not so beneficial and it kind of depends how much you're earning. In the past, it was very much limited company is the way to go. So that is something that changes with different governments. We've just had a general election, so potentially those rules will change again. So that's not necessarily ever something that's set in stone, that the tax rules are going to be beneficial. For me, the main things were protecting my family, really, rather than me, in terms of liability, and also having a name that's just mine and no one else can have.
I went with an LLC and I did that too, to protect my family's assets versus whatever happens in my business.
Yeah, you never know what could happen. And actually, I'll say my company name is my maiden name because I just thought it was a nice way to include the name I grew up with in my business. There's so many different ways you could come up with a company name, but yeah, that just felt quite kind of sweet to me. And you guys did well pronouncing it correctly. Lots of people stumble over it, even though it said how it's spelled. But anyway.
I did the same thing. Mine is Literary Dawn. Dawn is my middle name.
Oh, yeah. And with the understanding that this isn't legal advice, aside from protecting yourself, is there any other thing that's really important for an indie author to get an LLC? And obviously tax reasons as well.
I think it's different for everybody. For some people, it won't be the right decision. There are lots of people who maybe they're only publishing one book. This is the one story that they want to tell, and they have no interest in having a further career, and they're happy to just have the sole trader, or I think it's called a sole proprietorship in the US, and that's fine. Just keep it nice and simple. Or they don't want to deal with all the paperwork. They don't feel that they have the knowledge, the abilities, or being able to pay somebody else to support them with that. So for some people, being a sole trader is perfectly fine, and lots of authors function that way. I think that it's important to consider your options and to think about whether that limited structure might be better for you, and to not be scared of it. It's something that is achievable, and you can get people to help you with the elements that maybe you don't understand, or get advice on different aspects of it. So it can be helpful for the reasons that we said, limiting liability and so forth, but it's not going to be for everybody. But I think everybody should be aware that it is an option so they can make the right decision for them and their business.
Are there any potential drawbacks? And what are some of the legal obligations to owning an LLC or a limited company?
Yeah, I mean, the main drawback is that you have to do some more paperwork. So you are going to need to every year, have good accounting records for a start, which any business owner should have anyway, but you have to submit those every year. And in this country, we have to do what's called a confirmation statement. So every year you sort of, you fill in this form to say like how many employees you have, what your address is, how many directors you have, which oftentimes is just, nothing's changed, takes 2 minutes. And then you pay, at the moment, I just did it, and I've written down, it was £34. I think that's right. For, just kind of saying, yes, nothing's changed. But there we are. It's a thing you have to do. In this country, you have to file information to HMRC, so His Majesty's something companies, don't know. I should know what that stands for. I can't remember. And also to Companies House, which are the people that you register your company with. So So yeah, a bit more paperwork and the potential that you could get fined if you don't, and that's on your public record. So that's the other drawback, is this public record side of things. You can look up my company on Companies House. You can see that I'm the director. You can see my past accounting and whether I filed it on time, and if I've ever had a fine for not doing something correctly. You can see all of that there. So again, if you're somebody that's not very good at that, that's all going to be there for people to see, should they want to look that up. I don't know why anyone would, but if they wanted to, they could. So yeah, I think just the drawback of having all that information out there and viewable by the public alongside your address, which is a tricky thing. I'll come on to that in a moment, but yeah, your company's address and your director's address are also public record.
I think here in the US for sole proprietor, when you file for that, it still puts everything on record here in the
That's
US.
interesting. Yeah, here it doesn't. Here you actually don't have to register at all. You just can kind of say to yourself, I think I'll form a company. Okay, I will. And that's it. You don't have to do anything else. What you do have to do is register for self-assessment, which actually I could have said earlier, as well as all the company information you have to do as a limited company owner. You would also be doing a self-assessment for any income that you've earned. But yeah, as a sole trader, that's really the main thing, is just that you are making sure that you're claiming your taxes correctly. And it'll only be if somebody checks through your documentation. So you should have it. You should have your accounts all clear, and you could be asked to provide it. But that depends on whether anyone decides that you're the one they're picking to check.
And then I think you said 34 pounds is what it is for you. Yeah, that's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
I do the LLC, and here it depends on state. I believe it's different in every state. And some states are really cheap, and some are like exorbitant, like hundreds of dollars. I live in Florida, where it's $100 and some a year, but I do pay a company, and I pay them like $30 to do it for me every year. They just send me the paperwork I have to sign, and that's it. I don't have to worry about it. So I don't have to remember it. I don't have to all the paperwork. Again, that's only useful for those who have the discretionary funds to put toward it. But I went with the LLC because I wanted to hide my address. And it's not automatic when you do an LLC, but through the company, I'm able to pay an extra $30 to have a different address associated with my name on file, so that I don't have to worry about, because my identity's been taken twice. So I did not want my address out there.
Yeah, and it is really important to protect yourself. By having a company and by writing books, you do become, to an extent, a public person. Obviously not that we're like celebrities and earning loads of money, but you do make yourself vulnerable to these things. I think I only wasn't shocked with the 34. Sorry, I was shocked with the £34, because I think it used to be 16 and it suddenly wasn't. That's kind of the only annual cost, unless, as you say, you sign up for other services.
You spoke a lot about the maintenance of once you have your business formed, but would you mind just walking us through a high level of how you get started forming an LLC or an LTD, with the caveat that, local and country laws will be different?
Yeah, exactly. So here you would fill in a whole load of paperwork to register your company with Companies House. So you would be saying what your company's called, what it does. So in this country, we choose something called a SIC code. Again, I can't remember what it stands for, SIC, and that denotes what business you're in. So I think mine is book publishing. So you can decide what your specific thing is, who your directors are, how much of a share in your business they own, what their position is, all that kind of information, and register it with Companies House. I didn't take that route similar to you, Shannon. I paid somebody to do it for me. So because in this country, we can't hide our addresses very well. We're not allowed to use a PO box here in the UK, which is a kind of convenient workaround in the US, but we're not allowed to do that. What I then chose to do was to use what we sometimes call a brass plate company, but it's essentially a company where I pay to use their address. That meant that my company address and my personal director's address is theirs. So if you look me up, my address is somewhere in London. I don't live in London, I don't work in London, but I'm paying to use that to mask my address. And I can choose certain levels of service. So I paid to have my company registered for me because it worked out some kind of deal and meant I didn't have to do the paperwork. You can have services like them receiving your mail or hiring meeting rooms or whatever level you want from them on top of your address. It can be as much of a sort of virtual office as you want it to be. But for me, I'm literally just paying for that address. If you do know somebody who owns a local business who are comfortable for you to use their address, you can do that. You have to have the permission of the person who owns the business. I did do that for a time. For about 2 years, I knew a company that were comfortable with that. So that can be a helpful way of doing it, not having to pay like an annual fee for this company's services. But But yeah, I think that high level process is around the kind of making those decisions. How do we get around these issues with what's public record? How we are going to divide up our company if there's more than one person? Just all that decision making really is the difficult bit, because actually the paperwork is not so bad. Obviously I didn't do it for my company, but I've seen it.
Yeah, and it could be intimidating because already, if you're trying to self-publish for the first time, there's so much you have to learn. And then thinking about what kind of business structure to have, it can be intimidating having all that much more paperwork. So I definitely appreciate you coming on and talking about this and trying to demystify some of this for our audience. So for you, in your, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying thank you.
So for you, and when you were researching and stuff, what did you find was a good source for reliable info on becoming this type of business structure?
Yeah, I mean, I did sort of generally Google things, but I have found that HMRC, so that our tax people, which I've remembered now is His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, came back to me. I think I'm confused by not saying Her Majesty anymore. I'm not used to it. We've got a king now. Yeah, so HMRC do have a lot of information on their website, and you can phone them. They are used to getting calls from small companies or individuals. I know sometimes it can feel a bit embarrassing to be calling up this like big, what would you call them, service, I suppose, or governmental organization to ask what might be deemed a silly question, but they're used to answering you and they want to support you in doing things correctly. So I've always found them really helpful, to the point where I had an issue once where it was my company accounts. I'd filed them incorrectly. So I think I'd sent them to Companies House and not HMRC. You're supposed to do both. Might have been the other way around. And so I incurred a fine. And I called them up and I said, I'm really confused. I've done it. And they said, no, you've only done it to one of us. You have to do it to both. And then they were really gracious and said, look, we can actually see that you have tried to do it, that this is just you not understanding. So they waived the fine and gave me something like another 2 weeks to do it. So they are genuinely really helpful. But as I say, information wise as well, if you're filling out, let's say, your company return, each section you're filling in, there's a little question mark. You can open that up and see what it means. And then you can obviously go on and Google if you don't understand some of the terminology that they're using. So yeah, there is useful stuff on there, but there's always kind of useful places online where people are sharing stuff. I'll give a shout out as well to my book about self-publishing. There's not tons of stuff in here about owning a business. There's a chapter, but it's more about the different options that you have and the things you need to make sure that you sort of have in place when publishing a book. So as we've said, what kind of company are you going to have? What are the different considerations around that? In fact, you're going to have to do bookkeeping and keep all your accounting information. You're going to need a bank account, all of that kind of information. So it's more of an overview of here are the things you need to consider rather than specific, this is how to fill in this form. But it might be helpful to some people.
Okay, so once you have an LLC or limited company set up, are there any additional requirements after that?
It's just those kind of annual things, and it's really important to keep on top of those. It's easy for these things to run away from you, and certain people have that tendency to just, tomorrow, it's fine, I'll leave it. And I think if you have it set up in your yearly calendar, I need to do all of my reporting at this time, because no one enjoys it. No one's like, yes, I get to go through all my bookkeeping. This is wicked. I always find that I've done my sums wrong somewhere and I have to spend hours combing through it and finding out which cell on my spreadsheet I've included twice or whatever. So it's never fun. But once you get into it, it's done. And I think if you set that time aside and you have that accountability, as we said earlier, of I'm going to do it, and then you make yourself do it, then you're not ending up having to do it the day before it's due. And related to that as well is just keeping on top of the gathering of information. So for me, the first of every month, I know that I need to just go through all of my income and outgoings over the previous month, figure out what everything was for, do all of my numbers, so that then I'm not having to do 12 months. Hopefully, when I come to do my reporting, it's all there and it's all correct, and it makes everything much easier. So yeah, I think in terms of additional requirements, as I say, it's being aware that you do have those yearly bits and bobs you need to do, but that it's worth making sure that you are actually on top of those things regularly, so it doesn't become this big scary thing when it's due. do.
Agreed. Although I do have to say, the only thing I do find enjoyable about doing the yearly stuff is I get to see how much more I'm growing every year. So that's a benefit. I try to tell myself, look, you're gonna get to see how much more you're growing.
This is true. It's nice to see and interesting to see, because sometimes you have a perception of how your year is gone, and then you look at it and go, oh, that's quite interesting because that element went up and that went down. And yeah, it can be good.
What's something that most people don't know about LLCs or LTDs that could be beneficial for us?
I think it's more of a kind of warning that I was thinking about. And actually, this was a conversation I had with my husband, because I was like, I don't know. I feel like I've kind of said most of the things. It might be beneficial tax-wise and might be beneficial in protecting you legally and all that. And it was him that came up with this point. And I thought it was a very good point, that most of us with these LLCs or LTDs are single person companies. As writers, we are, because we're writing the books, we're publishing the books. It's just that one person. But there will be some people who are choosing to work with other people. So whether that's that you brought your partner into your company as a shareholder, all sorts of different reasons why you might do that, or they're working with you, you want a way of paying them that isn't via payroll, but you might be working with another author that you've met, that you've decided you're going to form this company together and work together on this, or a friend, and maybe you're doing the writing, they're doing the publishing, whatever. There might be more than one director in your company, and you need to be aware, if you are working with other people in that way, that they may have a history that you need to know about. So again, in the UK, it might work differently elsewhere. If you go on my public record for my company and you click on my name, you would be able to see if I'd been a director of any other company. I haven't been, but you could see that. And you might be working with someone and you might not know that they were a director on this company that went bankrupt, or this company that was dissolved and it all looks a bit dodgy, or they worked in this field that to you is kind of unethical. So it's worth double checking, have they been a director for another company before? But also, what's their financial history? Because as a limited company, when you apply for things, you apply as a company, not a person. So if you were applying for a business loan, for example, they would be looking at the sort of financial history of the directors. So if you suddenly found out that that person that you were working with had a terrible credit rating, or as I say, they'd gone bankrupt, or their company had gone bankrupt and you didn't know, that might affect the financing that you were relying on for your company. And I know most of us as authors aren't going to be facing this, but some people do build companies together and it could be an issue. So if you are working with somebody, it's knowing as best as you ever can, asking the questions, is there anything I need to know about if we're going into business together, so that you know who you're associating with. I think we all do this in terms of if we're working with an editor or a cover designer or any kind of freelancer, we have a little look at what they do, who they work with, and make sure that that is somebody with a reputation that we're comfortable with. And if we came across somebody and thought, oh, not sure about their views on social media, or whatever it might be, they don't align with me, then we might make a decision not to work with that person, because then suddenly that flags up that you had that business interaction and that doesn't sit well. Again, you're a public person running this business. But yeah, it becomes even more complex if you were actually going into business with them. Of course, as well, another thing is that if you were going into business with multiple people, if their shareholding is higher than yours, they could work together to outvote you on things, or even take the company away from you, And okay, if you have all equally brought this company together, let's say there's 3 of you, you've got 33% each, and that's all fair. It's nobody's original idea, or I started this company and then you joined, or whatever. But if that is your thing, like if it's my company I've been running for 7 years and then I bring 2 other people on, give them 33% each, and then they chuck me out, It's just always being aware. I think it's a value to be a bit suspicious and look into people's background, be aware of what's going on, and think about those worst case scenarios, because it does happen to people. People do get ripped off. Lots of people in the author community get ripped off. So just doing your research is a good thing, I think, is the overall message.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And we do have some people, even on authortube, who co-write things together. So definitely helpful information there. So before Kickstarter became popular through Brandon Sanderson, you did one in 2021, which I want to ask you some questions or at least a question with your limited company, but do you want to tell us what your Kickstarter was about?
Yeah, so as I said, I published my book Milk, that was, a longer novel. Is it a novel when it's like memoir? And then Lily the Limpet Gets Lost. So I had 2 books. I was really excited. March 2020, I did loads of school visits. I finished a whole week. So World Book Week, I did school visits all week. I went away for a couple of days to see my friends. I came back and I did a talk for our local council on International Women's Day. And I was like, this is amazing. My business is going to take off and everything's going to be amazing. And then we all remember what happened in March 2020. And this kind of thing that I'd been building, that I could feel that energy. And I was so riding that and really excited by it, obviously just kind of completely nosedived. And I was then in the situation where, like most of us, we were isolating at home. I had 3 young children at home with me as well. So my youngest at the time was 2 when lockdown happened. And so I'd gone from, she just started nursery, I'd just started to have a bit of time to work on my business a bit more, to she's at home and I've got to entertain her other than when my husband's working flexibly and things like that. So it was suddenly this difficult thing. And alongside all of that, I was not making vast sums of money. Obviously, school visits had gone away, and with school visits, I can charge a day fee as well as selling books, but that was no more. I wasn't able to sell in bookshops like local museums and all those things. It was just online, and online is hard. There are so many books, so many amazing books, and so much on social media. Even with advertising and all the information in the world, it's often just shouting into the void. So I was making the odd sale here and there, but really not very much. I'm very grateful for my YouTube channel that was bringing me in some money, but I wasn't having the money coming in to be able to invest in a new book. And I'm looking at what's going on in the world and thinking, I just can't see any way that I am going to be able to. And I've created all this and kind of gone, this is what I'm doing with my life. I am writing books and publishing books, and this is exciting. And all that momentum's gone, and I've got all these ideas, and it just felt like this I don't know what to do situation. And the project that I had in mind at the time was to kind of combine the 2 things of the book about breastfeeding and the children's book, and write a children's book about breastfeeding. So my book Milk and Cookies, the concept is that it explains what different mammals do. So a little girl goes to see her aunt who's just had a baby. She's feeding her baby and she says, oh, what are you doing? And her aunt talks about, I'll show for those of you watching, for example, how an orangutan feeds their baby, or how a giraffe feeds their baby. And it's got loads of cool like animal facts, and just sort of gives a context. They feed their babies. This is how humans feed their babies. That's what's occurring. So a family could use that in the context of a new baby in the family, or they could use it with a child asking questions and enabling a certain amount of explanation, but also a lot of room for the family to have their own conversations depending on their own sort of personal experiences and how they want to talk about these things. So I felt that this was an important project. It tied up the things that I'd done and I was excited about it. But as I say, there was no, how am I going to finance it? How am I going to anything? It just, you know how things were. Everybody, 2020 was great fun. And I came across Kickstarter. The other aspect to mention is that until that point, I'd been using print on demand. So Milk, my first book, actually is still print on demand. But Lily the Limpet used to be print on demand through Ingram Spark. They have made some changes recently, and I haven't seen the new sort of paper thicknesses and what have you. But at the time, the quality was disappointing for me. A children's book typically has thicker paper stock than an adult's book. It has different paper finishes. So mine are silk, so you get a slight sheen on them. You know, just that higher quality, higher finish. A children's book is a beautiful thing to look at. That's the point. The child wants to see the pictures and all of that. Whereas an adult's book is, let's get lots of pages into one thing. I also was keen that on this next children's book, I could do something with a better quality. I'd also been part of a Facebook group that was very vocal in talking about the importance of ordering bulk printed books through a printing company with the ability to choose all of those things. So your paper stocks, your finishes and what have you. But that costs a lot of money and I didn't have money to do that. So yeah, ultimately I decided that what I would do is do a Kickstarter with the view that it would enable me to do this in a different way, to produce a higher quality book that I felt was in line with what traditional publishers do, but also literally kickstart my business because I was unable to do anything in COVID. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am to the people who backed this campaign. I'm not kidding when I say that it literally kickstarted my business, which is what it should do. Without that money, I would have spent years before I was able to finance another project. There would have been no books from me for a long time. And obviously with no books, your audience disappears. You've got nothing to say. You're not doing anything. And all that creative energy of all these ideas, nothing's happening with it. So yeah, I'm enormously grateful that people felt that this was a book worth investing in. It was amazing. It's a crazy thing. I recently supported a friend of mine through her first Kickstarter, and the sort of emotions where you're so excited when someone backs your project, you can't believe it. And but also
especially someone you don't know.
Yeah. And then are we going to get there? Are we actually going to make it? And
a lot of anxiety.
One of the craziest ones I had was because I check it compulsively, you know, is there another one? Is there another one? And I suddenly got a backing, whatever you call it. I think it's Kickstarter backer so I was offering school visits. Someone could pay for a school visit. By this point, we were starting to be a bit more back in person. So someone could pay for that, and they could suggest a school if they wanted, or they could leave it open that a school could benefit from that money. Somebody backed me for it, and it was a friend of mine's mum. And I messaged her and I said, oh, I think your mum has mucked up, because I think, let's say that was £300, and I also had a £30 offering that was a hardback. It was something like that. And I said, I think your mum's messed up. She's put an extra zero on. And my friend went, oh, okay, I'll chat to my mum. And then came back and went, my mum says you're welcome. And I was just like, oh, it's the emotions are a lot, and the confidence boost that people really believe in what you're doing and want to back it. It really did mean the world.
Yeah, you get that market validation before you actually publish, and wonder if that market validation is there. So yeah, I've done one, and I felt all those same things, but it was a lot of anxiety for sure.
Absolutely.
I don't know a whole lot about this company, but when you were mentioning how Ingram Spark didn't offer like the best paper quality, have you looked into Book Vault?
Yes, I made a video about it recently. If anyone wants to look, I did like a review on their quality. Again, I'm sorry, this might be quite a waffly answer. I'll try not to. When I published Lily the Limpet Gets Lost, I went with Ingram Spark because I can't remember why. I can't remember why I didn't use KDP. No, can't remember. But there was a reason why I specifically chose Ingram Spark. My Milk, for example, is with both. So I can't remember why it was just the one. At that time, I believe Book Vault did exist, but no one was talking about it. It wasn't, I never saw it. I definitely would have been interested knowing about them now. So in order to get the quality that I have, I went down the bulk printing route. Now recently, January, I was headed towards publishing my Captivating Kelp Forest, my most recent release. And I had some printing issues with the company I work with. We got to a point where I was very close to the launch date, and I work with Natural England. I was launching it at the Isle of Wight Story Festival. It's this big thing. And I was terrified that I wouldn't have books. It was all getting scary close to the deadline, and I investigated every option. I had other print companies, I was requesting prices, samples, everything, so that if I had to pull the plug on my print company, I had options. And one of the ones I looked into was Book Vault, and I was so impressed. The quality is the same. I would say you could pick up the Book Vault version of this that I have and this one, which is a print company, and they look the same. They have the same finishes. It's ever so slightly thinner because I do choose a slightly thicker paper stock, but you'd never notice. So it is a professional looking, what you would see if you bought a children's book in a bookshop. It's brilliant, and their service is very, very good. Obviously it means you don't have to have loads of copies. I've got 1,000 of these or something, and I don't know, I've got probably about 3,000 books in my book storage. If you use Book Vault, you don't have to do that. I currently don't distribute my children's books internationally because I would have to ship them from here. That doesn't work. So, well, international customers can buy them via my website, but they have to buy shipping. It's not available via Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any of those places. I have thought about using Book Vault for all the other countries. Again, as you said, it's a time thing. At some point I might do. But yeah, I definitely feel that the quality is there, the distribution is there. They're bringing exciting new things in all the time. Definitely a good option. I'd already headed down this kind of bulk printing route. I think if I'd have known about Book Vault, and I don't know what they were like back then, if they'd have been suitable, that's absolutely the way I would have gone, because I like print on demand. So yeah, really recommend. They're very good.
Yeah, and I will definitely link your video in the show notes for anyone interested in watching that. They're definitely an up and coming company. They are based in UK. They're coming to the US. They have a couple print shops in the US, working with some library printing companies, but they've had some issues. I think they're kind of resolving them. But the one thing I'm super excited about, which I know for you may not be something you're thinking about this time, which is they're going to do print on demand, so printed book box sets.
Oh, yeah, and I think they listen to what authors want. So yeah, they do like box sets, but you could get a ribbon, or you could get I think they do spot lamination, or they were talking about doing it. So that's so cool.
Yeah, Joanna Penn uses them for her Kickstarters, and I actually met with the two company owners. I can't remember their name because I had the one meeting, and then what we had talked about never panned out. So then I just let it go. And that was earlier this year. But they had said that they were doing the book box printed first for Joanna Penn to see how that worked out. I don't know if they've done it yet. I haven't looked back into it, but when I heard the issues that were happening in the US, that's why I was like, okay, I'm just gonna stop right now. But I've heard now that they fixed some of it. They have plugins or whatever you want to call it. So I don't know what it's called on different things, but there is now a way to do it on your website. If you sell like through PayHip or Wix, you can now do it a pay on demand through that website through them for them to print on demand. So which I haven't yet. So I'm gonna look back into it. And now that some of the issues have been resolved, I want to get that on my website.
Yeah, they're definitely a very good company. One of the reasons I've remembered why I don't use them is because especially with the Natural England books, and actually to be fair, I mean, these habitats, seagrass and kelp, are around the world, but the particular species we're looking at are UK species. But part of what I wanted to do was make sure that these books had some environmental credentials. So they are printed in the UK, and I purposefully, have chosen a UK printer, and they're printed on sustainably sourced paper. So all of that kind of stuff that I know, because I know where they were printed, I can ensure all of that. Book Vault, for example, I don't know. I think they do have some environmental credentials, but obviously they're going to be printing wherever the local printer is to the place where the book's being sold, and it limits my control over some of the environmental choices I make. I also make choices around like my packaging is all card and things like that. I mean, something like that maybe isn't such a big deal, but yeah, again, for me, it's just like, the Book Vault version would have to not say those environmental things in the book, and how do I feel about when I've made those choices, then having around the world that the book doesn't have those choices? I don't know. Again, it's a time thing, because I could sit down and kind of decide how I feel about that and look into what Book Vault does. But yeah, the environmental side of things was an aspect for me.
So would you say that creating your limited company provided additional benefits or protections for when you ran your Kickstarter back in 2021?
I don't think it did necessarily, but what I think it did do was show a certain amount of credibility and my seriousness in this, that I owned a business, that I had a name and a logo and all of the things, shows that I have like a bigger picture in mind. I think I don't know how many people actually did look at that, and kind of, obviously that information was there, but whether that did add, for those people I don't know that had kind of stumbled across me online where I was sharing this everywhere and decided they wanted to back it, that gave them a certain amount of, oh, she means it. I like to think that it did help. I think in general, as an author, whether you're a sole trader, whether you have a limited liability company, when someone's buying your books, if they go on and they can see a company name, and the LTD afterwards does help, or the LLC, but they can see that rather than you get independently published is one of them, or if it was Milk by Emma Rosen, published by Emma Rosen, you sometimes see that then that person sees it and goes self-help, and there's still that stigma attached. So I think there's a lot to be said around having any company with whatever name you want to give it that just kind of says I'm a professional, and that allays some fears for some people if they have figured out that you're self-published and they go, oh, okay, no, but they're professional at what they're doing, or they might not even know that you're self-published. It's horrible that we have to hide this, because I think self-published authors allow for an immense amount of creativity that sometimes traditionally published authors can't do, because what they need to do has to be commercial and has to fit in with whatever their publishing company is doing. We can do whatever we want. That's so exciting. Obviously, it means some people do whatever they want and it's a bit questionable, but you can say that about any creative industry. And for some reason, we have indie bands. They're so cool. They do all these fun things. But an indie author is like, are you just making weird PDFs and putting them on the internet? And even if I am, that can still be really cool and creative. So I don't know. We still have this stigma.
Well, we got a nice, easy question for you then. Was creating an LTD the right decision for you as an indie author?
For me, it was. I don't think it's the right decision for everybody. For me, the reasons were good enough reasons for me. I also had the support in place because my husband was and is a director in companies. So he had an idea of the paperwork could help me or direct me in the right place to get help if I needed it. That was great. Sometimes these words like turnover, revenue, whatever assets, we might not have come across that. We're creatives. So it's helpful to have support around you. And as I say, I don't think it is for everybody, But for me, it definitely was. And I have a vision of what I want for the future. The likelihood is it is just going to be me publishing my books, but hopefully kind of growing this more and more, selling more copies, doing more school visits, doing more kind of interesting, fun stuff. But I've got an avenue if I wanted to publish other people's stuff or whatever within that, because I have this kind of company that could be however big I want it to be and expand it, bring people on. So it gives me a lot of scope for the future as well.
I've always thought about doing like an anthology or something under my company name, but I don't know. I keep adding more and more stuff to my plate as just an indie author that I'm like, I don't have time to do anybody else's stuff.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to shift from the questions about the LLCs and LTDs to your writing and writing life. So how much of your time is devoted to writing, marketing, and managing your company? Or another way to say is how much time do you devote to managing your companies, versus the time you spend writing and marketing?
In terms of literally the paperwork I have to do, very little. I would say that the bookkeeping takes me an hour or two every month. And then the sort of filing the paperwork might be a day or two every year. It's not masses of time. What takes the time, and I'm sure we all find this, is all the emailing people about the things, chasing up Amazon. I've been chasing Amazon for 6 months now about a particular issue that I have with them. It's not necessarily Amazon, all different companies for all different things, chasing the invoices, creating the opportunities, finding new stockists, for me, trying to find new schools and to work with. It's all the admin that takes the time, I think, not the stuff that's specific to running a business. It's just the admin associated to being an indie, which for a lot of people is why they don't want to do it. If you're traditionally published, you write the story, someone else does most of that work. You'll do some of it. You might be going into schools. You should be marketing your work however you're published. So there'll be some of it, but not the volume we're doing. Yeah, that's the thing that takes the time.
What does your typical writing life look like? Do you plan to write for a set period? Do you sit there and draft up the visuals that you want within your children's book? I mean, how do you allocate the time, or how much time do you allocate to writing in general?
I think my working life, well, I was going to say it's different, but I don't think it is actually. I have a second job. I don't earn enough money through doing this to pay the bills in our house. So I work doing supply teaching and cover teaching. Typically that's 2 days a week. It's the summer holidays right now, so I'm not doing that, although I'm wrangling children on those days. So I don't work a full writing week. I probably do 2.5 days typically every week, because I also do some voluntary work 1 day a week. My time is a little bit limited. I typically do creative tasks in the morning. So I force myself to write. Sometimes I might use journaling to help me get into it, light some candles, all the things. Try and get some writing done for about an hour. Then I might do other creative things such as filming, editing videos and such like. And then my afternoon is all the admin. If I don't do it that way around, I won't ever get to the writing. I'll put it off, and I will spend my entire day doing admin. So I've definitely found, in terms of a routine, that works for me. In terms of how I write, it varies book to book. For example, I'm writing a book at the moment for Trilling. Again, it's not part of a marine series. They sort of come to me with a topic and some key points, and I'll then try and split that into the number of pages and have that sort of as notes. This page is going to be this, then this, and that. And then I start playing with words and finding words that kind of feel nice, because the children's books are rhyming, so it needs to have that sort of fun word use, or that has a rhythm to it. So I do that. I put I play with it, and I find it kind of appears. So there's an element of planning of like, how is this going to be structured? But then in terms of what the actual content is, that's more of a playful experience.
Okay, so what are you working on next? So you kind of talked about it a little bit, but can you give us any more details, and like, when do you think it might come out?
Yeah, so the next book is a land-based book. It's going to be about soil. The illustrator, Rhiannon Thomas, and I think we've both said that online now, so whether we were supposed to or not, we have. So that's going to be, it's very similar in some ways to the marine books, looking at, making children excited about ecosystems and habitats and why we should protect these things, what's special about them. In the same way as under the sea, you have that surface of the sea and you don't know what's beneath. The same with the soil. You don't know what what's going on, and it's actually really cool and interesting. So that's what we're doing just now. There will be the next in the marine and coastal series at some point. It's not been started yet, but I think it will do before too much longer. This is going to be, I think we're talking about maybe a 6-book series, but that will depend on funding and so forth. So never want to kind of promise anything as such, but there is another one that's been discussed. We know what the subject is likely to be, and that hopefully will come soon. And then I have a couple of my own projects that I work on when I have time. So if I'm waiting for Natural England to look through my drafts, I'm then working on my own stories. I doubt that those would come out before the projects with Natural England. They just sort of go on in the background, but it could happen. So, I mean, I love the children's picture books. They're exciting. And the partnership with Natural England is, I feel so privileged to have this situation with them, that they are working with us to try and help environmental literacy and kids, and it is just the best to be able to share these exciting things with children. So yeah, I'm thrilled to have that still going on.
Nice, that is fantastic. And we'd like to shift it up and do something a little bit different. So we want to do a round of rapid fire questions where you answer as quickly as possible. Are you up for that?
Let's go. Yeah.
Perfect. So what comes first for you? The characters, the setting, or plot?
I guess setting, but I mean in terms of like topic, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Morning writer or night writer?
Morning, definitely.
Planner, pantser, or planter?
Planter, yeah, there's elements of both.
Coffee, hot cocoa, or tea?
Definitely coffee. I cannot stand tea. I'm that weird British person. Hate it.
Can you complete the sentence? The best thing about writing is?
Sharing stories with kids actually is the best bit. I do write adults books, but kids ones are special.
If you could write in any other genre, what would it be?
Fantasy, I think.
I was gonna say, that's us. We write fantasy.
What is your favorite book to write?
I think kids books. It's just it's the bit afterwards when you get to share the stories. It's just amazing. Yeah.
Least favorite book to write?
I like them all. In some ways, I would say the one I am writing at the time, because at the time, I hate it and I don't want to do it. I don't want to do the work. But when I'm planning it or when it's done, then it's great. So the one I'm in is usually the one I don't like.
What's your favorite children's book?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I feel like I should just be like, kids ask me this as well, and I'm always like, oh, I don't know. What have I read recently to my kids? I'll tell you what I really enjoy is The Snail and the Well. I know I said it earlier, by Julia Donaldson. I think it's stunning. Really beautiful book.
Well, you have answered all of our questions. Before we wrap up, can you please tell our listeners where they can find you and purchase your books?
Yeah, so my website is emmarosenbooks.co.uk. That'll link you to everywhere, and my books are on there. As a children's book, are not available internationally unless you go on there. I'm on Instagram a lot and I'm on YouTube a lot, but I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn. I think that's it. But yeah, YouTube and Instagram are my main ones, and I'm Emma Rosen Books in all the places.
Perfect. And thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for being so willing to re-record our episode. Again, we are so sorry that there were technical issues, and we are still able to get all your valuable information out to the world, and thank you for that.
No problem. I mean, look, we've finished and it's light, so I'm happy.
We really appreciate all of your wonderful insight and experiences as an indie author, as an LTD director, and all of the processes in forming your business.
Thank you. I hope it's helpful. Obviously, it changes here and there, and everybody has different skill sets and opinions and stuff. But yeah, I hope there was some useful stuff in there.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. Coming up next on our podcast, we will interview contemporary romance author Skye Winter. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much to our incredible listeners and viewers for joining us on our exploration of everything self-publishing. We hope you found our podcast to be a treasure trove of insights and inspiration. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform or thanks on our YouTube episodes. Don't forget, you can catch all of our past episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and other major podcast platforms. Keep writing, keep publishing, and we'll see you next time.